Right now, in 2026, we are looking at this really intense divide in the enterprise technology landscape.
Yeah, a massive divide.
It really is. On one hand, you have Gartner's latest AI infrastructure report, right? And it shows that 64% of organizations are actively moving agentic AI systems into production.
Which is just a staggering number when you think about it.
Exactly. And the financial incentive for doing that is, well, it's profound. I mean, McKinsey is tracking an average ROI of 340% over just an 18-month period.
Right, but there's a pretty massive catch.
There is. If you are listening to this and you're mapping out your Q3 tech budget, you are likely feeling the weight of the other side of that divide.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you deploy these autonomous systems without an ironclad governance architecture,
Yeah.
you are just accumulating operational and legal debt at a speed we really haven't seen before.
Yeah, you're building on sand.
Exactly. AI leaders, particularly those operating in the highly regulated tech hub of Pam Pear, are warning that deploying agents without governance is just a catastrophic liability.
And the urgency behind that warning, it's directly tied to the calendar. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
today is March 20th, 2026.
Right.
That means the enforcement deadlines for the EU AI Act, specifically the mandates governing those high-risk AI systems, are now officially active.
They're here.
They're here. For European business leaders, CTOs, developers, this represents a hard operational pivot. We are no longer operating in a grace period.
The grace period is over.
Completely over.
Yeah.
If you are building in ecosystems like Tampere, Finland, which, is heavily concentrated with industrial and infrastructural tech, you can't simply plug in an autonomous agent and promise to audit its behavior later.
Right. You can't just cross your fingers.
No, you can't. Governance must be structurally integrated from the very first line of code, or the legal penalties and the required remediation will easily eclipse that 340% return.
Which is exactly why we are pulling our insights today directly from AetherLink.
Yeah, they've been way ahead of this.
They really have. They're a Dutch AI consulting firm that has basically spent the last few years navigating this exact friction point.
Right.
They operate three distinct divisions. So there's AetherBot, which handles the AI agent side, then AetherDV for AI development, and AetherMind, which is their AI strategy consulting arm.
And we're really focusing on AetherMind's insights today.
Exactly. We are going to examine their latest framework for deploying agentic AI. And the mission for this deep dive isn't just to, check the boxes for 2026 compliance.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It is to understand how constructing these regulatory guardrails actually optimizes the system, turning a legal requirement into a massive structural advantage for your enterprise.
That framing is so critical. The organizations that are actually successfully navigating this transition, they're treating the EU AI Act not as a constraint, but as an architectural blueprint.
I love that, an architectural blueprint.
Right, because by building systems that can explain their own reasoning and monitor their own reliability, they are fundamentally upgrading how their enterprises scale.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the regulatory panic, we first have to clarify the technical leap that triggered it.
Yeah, we need to define the baseline.
Right, so if you are tuning in, you already know the baseline capabilities of large language models. But we're moving past those generative models that simply act as high-powered assistant.
Right, where it's just a traditional GPS.
Exactly. Traditional AI is like a highly advanced GPS. Gives you the best route, but you still have to drive the car. You review the output, you execute the task.
But agentic AI is the self-driving car.
Yes. The shift to agentic AI means the system is built with tools and recursive reasoning loops. It perceives the environment, makes the decision, and actually turns the wheel with minimal human intervention.
It's actually doing the work.
It is. The agent is analyzing a supply chain disruption, querying the inventory database via an API, formulating a purchase order, and executing that order all without you doing a thing. The software is taking autonomous action.
What's fascinating here is how that shift toward autonomous action completely redefines an enterprise's risk profile.
Right, because the stakes are higher.
So much higher. When an AI moves from just generating text to executing external tool calls, the potential for cascading errors changes dramatically.
Because it's a chain reaction.
Exactly. If an agent misinterprets a data point, right, and it automatically sends incorrect pricing to a vendor.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And then another agent updates your financial forecasting based on that incorrect contract. The error compounds in milliseconds.
Before a human even knows it happened.
Exactly. Now, this dynamic action is what's driving those massive productivity gains. I mean, we're seeing 72% of enterprises reporting measurable productivity improvements within just 6 months.
Which is huge.
It's huge, but it removes the natural friction of human review. And that removal of friction is precisely why the European Union structured the new regulations to target autonomous execution in very specific sectors.
That makes perfect sense. The regulation is chasing the autonomy. Because these systems are, independently turning the wheel themselves, the EU has categorized their deployment in specific industries as inherently high risk.
And the EU AI Act is unambiguous on this front.
Very strict.
Extremely. If your enterprise touches construction, real estate, hiring, or critical infrastructure.
Which basically defines the whole Tampere innovation ecosystem.
Exactly. If you are in those sectors, your agentic systems fall under the high-risk classification.
So what does that actually mean for the folks running these systems?
It means operating legally now requires a highly specific set of mechanisms. You are required to maintain documented risk assessments that map out potential failure states.
Okay.
You must implement continuous post-deployment monitoring.
To catch what exactly?
Largely to detect model drift, which is, it occurs when an AI's performance degrades because the real-world data it interacts with starts to differ from its training data.
Ah, right.
Furthermore, you need deterministic transparency mechanisms.
Meaning,
if an auditor asks why an agent rejected a specific vendor contract, the system has to provide the exact logical path and the data weights that led to that decision.
okay, let me push back on the mechanics of that for a second.
Sure.
Because honestly, that sounds like an operational nightmare. If you're a CTO and the mandate is to maintain an immutable audit trail for every single micro-decision an autonomous agent makes.
Across thousands of workflows.
Right. Thousands of workflows a day.
Uh-huh.
Aren't you essentially trading a human labor bottleneck for a massive data storage and compute bottleneck?
It definitely sounds like it.
Right. How does an enterprise physically manage the latency and the storage costs of documenting every API call and reasoning step without the whole system just grinding to a halt?
Well, that is the defining engineering challenge of 2026.
I bet.
Because if you attempt to log and review every action retroactively, you will drown in telemetry data.
You'd need a whole data center just for the logs.
Exactly. So the solution AetherLink's framework outlines is the implementation of what they call a governance control plane.
A governance control plane. Okay.
Right. Rather than acting as a passive recording device, the control plane is an active, centralized architectural layer that sits above your operating agents.
Okay, so it's a gatekeeper.
Yes, it evaluates the agent's proposed action against your predefined corporate policies and EU regulations before the action is actually executed.
So if we use a different analogy here, instead of a supervisor reading a mountain of reports at the end of the day,
Right.
it's more like a circuit breaker in your house's electrical panel.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
The electricity flows freely and instantly, right? But the millisecond, the system detects an anomaly, like a power surge, or in this case, an agent hallucinating a policy, the breaker snaps the circuit shut before any damage actually occurs.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The control plane acts as the circuit breaker.
And it does this in real time.
In real time, it is continuously evaluating the confidence scores of the agent's reasoning.
Okay.
If an agent is processing a routine invoice, the confidence score is high, the control plane logs the metadata, and the action proceeds in milliseconds.
Business as usual.
Right. But if the agent attempts to authorize a transfer that violates a regional compliance rule, or if its confidence just drops below a set threshold, the control plane automatically halts the execution.
It snaps the breaker.
Exactly. And then it escalates that specific decision to a human operator. So the human remains in the loop, but only for the anomalies.
That makes so much more sense than reviewing everything.
And the numbers back it up. Research from the European Commission's AI office indicates that organizations which implemented these control plans early by the second quarter of 2025 have reduced their compliance remediation costs by a staggering 58%.
Wait, really? 58%?
58%.
Wow. That 58% reduction is a compelling argument that compliance architecture is actually a cost-saving measure if you deploy it proactively.
Absolutely.
But conceptualizing a control plane is one thing. Actually building it, the actual plumbing required to integrate it into legacy enterprise systems, that seems incredibly complex.
It is, and it requires a total departure from how we historically built software. Ethermine refers to this as AI-led architecture. To manage the latency and the security demands of 2026, enterprises are transitioning to hybrid architectures.
Okay.
And those rely heavily on the Model Context Protocol, or MCP.
Let's dive into MCP, because for European businesses dealing with strict data sovereignty laws like GDPR, this protocol solves a very painful problem.
A massive problem.
Because you often have highly sensitive proprietary information. We're talking unreleased manufacturing schematics or, localized HR records.
Stuff you cannot leak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot send that data out to a public cloud inference model. But you also really need the advanced reasoning capabilities of those massive cloud models to orchestrate your workflows.
And that is the exact friction MCP was designed to eliminate.
It's the magic bullet.
It really is. The Model Context Protocol acts as a standardized, highly secure, universal translator.
Oh.
It allows your cloud-based foundational models to request context from your local on-premise servers.
Wait, without sending the data?
Exactly. Without the actual underlying data ever being absorbed into the cloud model's training set.
That is brilliant.
The data stays in your secure local enclave, processed by local agents, while the broader orchestration happens up in the cloud. You maintain absolute data sovereignty without sacrificing cognitive power.
That is huge. And there's a secondary benefit to using open standards like MPP and frameworks like LangChain or Audigen, which is avoiding vendor lock-in.
Oh, yes. The ultimate trap.
Right. We saw this constantly with early AI adoption. A company would build their entire internal toolset around a single provider's proprietary API.
And then the provider changes the rules.
Exactly. If that provider suddenly changed their pricing structure, altered their privacy policy, or even just deprecated the specific model you relied on, your entire operation was paralyzed.
Vendor lock-in is a critical vulnerability. But by utilizing open-source frameworks like LangChain, you abstract the agent's logic away from the underlying language model.
So the framework is independent.
Yes. The framework handles the memory, the tool calling, the reasoning loop. The LLM is just the engine.
I see.
So if a vendor changes their terms, or if a better, more compliant open-weight model is released, you can simply swap out the engine without having to rebuild the entire car.
That is incredibly modular.
It ensures your agents remain portable and your governance structures remain intact regardless of who is providing the compute.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Seeing how all these architectural concepts, so the control planes, the MCP integrations, the open frameworks, actually survive contact with reality.
Right. Theory versus practice.
Exactly. When you look at the real-world deployments in the AetherLink research, you really start to see how this reshapes an industry.
The Gensler case study is a great example of this.
Yes, Gensler, the global architecture firm. They had a significant challenge dealing with the fragmented, highly localized building codes across all these different European municipalities.
Right, which is a nightmare to manage manually.
It's a total nightmare. But the Gensler case study is a perfect illustration of agentic governance in action.
Because they didn't just deploy a chatbot to answer questions about building codes.
No, they went way further.
They integrated an agentic system into their actual design pipeline. The human architects would feed the preliminary design briefs into the system, along with the...
And because they had that governance control plane in place, the agents were able to autonomously iterate on the designs.
That's the key.
They processed the complex spatial data, cross-referenced it with the local regulations, and dynamically flagged compliance risks.
Before the human even had to look for them.
Exactly. If a proposed structural element violated, say, an accessibility code or an energy efficiency standard, the agent identified it, documented the specific regulatory conflict, and offered an optimized alternative.
And all of this happens before the human architect even begins their manual review.
It's incredible. And the metrics Gensler achieved through this deployment are striking.
Oh, the ROI is undeniable.
They documented a 45% acceleration in their overall design cycles.
45%.
Yeah. But more importantly, they saw a 28% reduction in compliance-related revisions.
Because the agents acted as an instantaneous audit layer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Catching those localized regulatory conflicts that typically cause severe delays in the later stages of a project. They also reported a 67% improvement in transparency with external stakeholders.
Why the jump in transparency?
Because every design decision the AI influenced was backed by an immutable, easily readable log generated by the control plane.
Right, the audit trail is baked in.
Exactly. Now, if you are a CTO sitting in Tampere looking at your local construction or advanced manufacturing sectors, the application here is just direct.
You can replicate this exactly.
You can deploy an ecosystem of agents dedicated purely to site compliance monitoring or, supply chain contract review.
And by integrating the same framework Gensler utilized, the projection suggests these sectors can eliminate 30 to 40% of routine operational errors.
Which is massive. You are effectively embedding a flawless compliance auditor into every single workflow, operating at the speed of your servers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, we do have to acknowledge the operational friction this creates.
You mean the human side of it?
Exactly. Implementing the technology is honestly often the easiest part of the equation. The failure point for most enterprises is the human element.
Right.
When an agentic system is autonomously reviewing the contracts and caching the building code violations, the day-to-day reality of your workforce fundamentally shifts.
Right, because if the system is doing the initial drafting and the compliance review, what is the junior associate actually doing all day?
Exactly. That is the cultural challenge that requires structured change management. And this is why Ethermind strongly advocates for the creation of an AI Center of Excellence, or COE, within the enterprise.
A dedicated team just for this transition.
Yes. You cannot simply hand an autonomous system to a workforce accustomed to traditional software and expect a seamless transition.
People are going to resist it.
They will. A significant portion of the workforce will initially view these agents with skepticism, or, on the flip side, they will overtrust the system and fail to monitor the escalations properly.
Like ignoring a cookie banner. Just clicking approve without reading.
Exactly. Alert fatigue.
So the COE's mandate is really to shift the employee's mindset from being an operator of a process to becoming a manager of an automated system.
Precisely. Your employees must be retrained on how to interpret the telemetry from the control plane. They need to understand how to tune the agent's parameters when its confidence scores begin to dip.
They need to understand the machine.
Right. They must become experts in handling the edge cases that the circuit breaker escalates to them. If you neglect the workforce readiness component, your employees will simply bypass the governance structures.
Or ignore the escalations entirely.
Yes, which neutralizes the entire investment.
And investing in that human element is what actually unlocks the most lucrative part of this transition.
The multiplier effect.
Yes. We touched on the 340% ROI for early agent deployments. But the AetherLink data highlights a concept known as the multi-agent multiplier.
Which is where things get really crazy.
It is, because the real operational leverage doesn't come from having one agent do one task really well. It comes from orchestrating multiple specialized agents that communicate with each other across a workflow.
It is the architectural difference between a single autonomous tool and a synchronized digital workforce.
Exactly. So imagine you have agent A, right? And it is optimized purely for ingesting vendor contracts. It extracts the terms and passes the structured data to agent B.
Okay.
Agent B is strictly a compliance monitor.
Yeah.
Its only job is to cross-reference those terms against the EU AI Act and your internal risk policy.
Right, the checker.
Exactly. And if agent B detects an anomaly, it doesn't just stop and throw an error. It packages the flagged context and routes it to agent C. And agent C formats an escalation brief and presents it to the human legal team, orchestrating that kind of interconnected, multi-agent workflow that compounds the financial returns to over 500% within an 18-month window.
Because you are eliminating the latency of human handoffs between departments.
Precisely.
The agents handle the routine processing, the internal auditing, and the formatting instantaneously. The human professionals only spend their time resolving the complex disputes that require nuanced judgment.
So what does this all mean? If I'm distilling this down for anyone listening who is responsible for their company's tech roadmap, my number one takeaway is the sheer velocity of that compounding ROI.
It's exponential.
It is. The transition from isolated predictive models to orchestrated multi-agent systems, that is the definitive dividing line between linear, incremental growth and exponential enterprise scaling in 2026. The efficiency gains are just too vast to ignore.
My central takeaway brings us back to the regulatory landscape we started with.
The governance piece.
Right. The enterprises that will actually survive this transition are the ones that view governance not as a defensive legal tax, but as their foundational operating system.
It has to be baked in.
It has to be. Building EU AI Act compliance, continuous monitoring, and control planes into your architecture today is the only method that permits safe scaling tomorrow. If you attempt to bolt governance onto an already functioning autonomous system later, The technical debt will crush the project.
You cannot retrofit a circuit breaker into a house that is already on fire.
That is entirely correct. Which brings me to a final consideration for you as you evaluate your own systems.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, this raises an important question. We have spent this entire discussion focusing on the necessity of perfect compliance.
Right.
The control planes, the audit trails, the strict adherence to predefined rules.
The guardrails.
Exactly. But historically, some of the most profound breakthroughs in architecture, engineering, and business strategy have come from human error, misinterpretation, or deliberate deviations from the standard process.
Oh, that's true. The happy accidents.
Right. If we build multi-agent systems that perfectly filter out every anomaly and strictly enforce compliance on every micro-decision, do we engineer serendipity out of our enterprises entirely? Does perfect compliance eventually become the enemy of creative innovation?
Wow. That is a fascinating tension to consider. As we build systems designed to never make a mistake, we really have to wonder what kind of human ingenuity we might be filtering out in the process. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.